So here he is, chamber enthusiasts, sports fans. Let's welcome home, a warm welcome home to Joe Sports.
Thank you very much, Jim. Actually, I've been more excited waiting to hear what Jim was going to say than I have been about whether I get through the remarks that I have prepared. Jim, that was a wonderful introduction. It's the second best to the one I received when I was the Grand Marshal for the Livers and Gizzards Festival in Broxton. My friend, the mayor of Broxton, is here and will attest to the fact that we had a great time at that great festival. It is good to be home. How appropriate it is to be introduced by Dr. Jim Cottingham, a member of a wonderful Douglas family. We grew up with them as members of the First Methodist Church. Tom and Farrah Cottingham married in 1946, raised a talented family, and 20 years later moved to North Carolina for college leadership positions. But how grateful we are that in 2010 they proved you can come home again and return to Douglas. And Jim Cottingham, the youngest retired college professor that I have ever met, thank you for your leadership at South Georgia and in your hometown community. I will say that I appreciate also your cleaning up that lobbyist joke a little bit. Actually, it was, don't tell my mama I'm a lobbyist. She thinks I play the piano in a whorehouse. Would you believe that actually, and I told our school superintendent that a few minutes ago, in this very spot, so far as land is concerned, in 1952, I graduated and completed the 12th grade of Douglas High School and walked outside and boarded a bus for a senior trip that was my first visit to Washington. Back then, there were 3 brick buildings sitting on this block. We started kindergarten in the first building, then we reached middle school in the middle building, and then the third building was the high school. Of course, all 3 buildings were level several years ago, so this magnificent facility that we're in could be constructed. In this new building, I was pleased just a few years ago to serve as the Master of Ceremonies for the great reunion of about 500 former students of Douglas High, a reunion initiated by a classmate, Frank Red Marshall. Those who returned for the reunion and those who've returned to Douglas from time to time through the years noticed many signs of progress and growth for this community. And all of us knew that the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Authority deserve credit for the advancements in the business community. And it didn't take long for most of us to get used to the one-way streets. I have enjoyed the opportunity of attending several of the Chamber's annual banquets. I was here when Greg Walker talked of his baseball career, and we were here when Billy Crider gave a report of the great poultry industry and its beginning with Crider's Poultry right here in Douglas. Billy gave all of the guests a sack full of canned chicken products which are sold around the world. Well, the best I could do was provide for you a replica of the sports fan button, which was a campaign button created for me 45 years ago. And so we did make some and bring them down, and I hope you all got one. And we added the color maroon for Coffee County to kind of update the button. May I say that I really appreciated the call I received from Andrea inviting me to be the speaker this year. I was proud that she had been selected to head as president of the chamber. She has outstanding qualifications. She's a Coffee County native, attended South Georgia College in Valdosta State. She has a master's degree from the University of Alabama, but in my view, her most significant accomplishment, where she really got her smarts, she was a staff writer for 2 years at the Douglas Enterprise, working with Walter Jardine. I have fond memories of my 5-year association with the Enterprise and the Fryer family, and appreciate the confidence that Thomas Fryer expressed in me, making me the associate editor when I was barely out of high school. Let me express appreciation to the current editor, Tracy Mayo, and to the Enterprise staff for the first article, news about my being the banquet speaker. They put a picture of me and my wife, Rhonda, accurately reflecting the most important visit I made to Douglas about 2 years ago when I asked Rhonda McNeil Davis to be my bride. And I'm proud that she joins me here tonight. Rhonda? We are now paying subscribers for the Enterprise, and when the paper reaches us in Conyers, Rhonda checks for news of the Childhood Cancer Awareness Group of Coffee County, a group that she helped start, and she's pleased of the good work that continues to be done by this group. When she hands me the paper, I turn first to the obituary page. As Zell Miller once said, to make sure I don't find my name there. I will have to comment regarding the historic page that the Enterprise publishes. Y'all have had me dropping my hat in the ring about 5 times in the last 12 months. And that's something that took place about 25 years ago. Let me recognize the guests at my table. First, Rhonda's daughter, Lucy Taylor, who still lives in Douglas. She has a degree in child and family development and has a commitment to working with the special needs children. I hope that the Coffee County School Board will give her a chance to follow in her daughter's footsteps of working for the Coffee County school system. Also, a retired school teacher who is here, my baby sister, Ann Messmore of Dunwoody, Georgia, and my favorite brother-in-law, Jasper Messmore. And I'm very proud that my great friend and his wife, Kathy Jo, are here. Please welcome the former United States Congressman from the 2nd District of Georgia, the Honorable Dawson Mathis. It was mentioned earlier that at my table also is Jody Redding, who has the best congressional job that there is. He gets a federal check from Washington and gets to live in South Georgia. He works with Senator Johnny Isakson and helps him provide outstanding constituent services throughout Georgia. And Johnny is running again, so this would be a good time if you need anything from Jody. He'll be right down here at this table. Dominique Laricchia got here just as we started. He drove down from Atlanta after the legislative session today. We enjoy working with him in Atlanta. I'm glad also to recognize a contribution to the Chamber and Economic Development Authority of a younger schoolmate of mine, and I've kept up with him through the years, and I want to express my thanks to Francis Lott for what he has done for Douglas and Coffee County. Actually, I know many of you came tonight at great sacrifice. You might miss part of the Republican debate, the last one before the Iowa caucuses, or you may be wanting to run home and watch the Donald Trump show. The people of Douglas have always shown pretty good political judgment. However, there's one recent race in which you're to be commended for electing a special leader, one who's going to mean a lot to Douglas. That was the election of Dominique Laricchia, to be your state representative. I can tell you that Dominique has adapted quickly to the process in Atlanta, and teamed with Senator Tyler Harper, they are showing great leadership that will bring meaningful benefits to Douglas and Coffee County, especially in the field of agriculture. I'm going to talk about my book in a few minutes, but first, I want to suggest to each of you here tonight, you have a story to tell. And I want you, each one, to get busy writing your own books. There are several ways to get your book published. Find a publisher in Georgia like Mercer Press, or there are 85,000 book publishers in the United States. And you can now submit your manuscript on ebooks and order as many books as you want. Since you will need to come up with a title for your book, a few of you, I've thought I would be helpful with some suggestions, since that has to be the first step. I have played all my life, Walter Huckabee. The Singing Physician, Dr. Diskin Morgan. Madam Mayor, Jackie Wilson. Proudly serving my country, Sergeant Major James H. Dennis. My brother is a judge, Tommy Preston. Apartments for rent, Francis Lott. We'll be the last to let you down, Neil and Chuck Sims. How to Catch a Rattlesnake by Robert Preston. Here We Go Again, Mayor Tony Paulk, re-elected mayor of Douglas. Following in Joanne's footsteps, Andrea Dorminey Taylor. President of the best junior college in America, Dr. Virginia Carson. And Tender Care by Teresa Lewis and Jonathan Lewis. Just a way to let you know that I'm pleased to have a new client in Douglas and will help publicize the professional home care they provide throughout 29 counties of South Georgia. Now I invite you to sit back and focus on the big screen and watch me grow old in the next 14 minutes. Let me review some of the people and politics of the man in the middle. The title comes from an Associated Press story about the confrontation of the Democratic Convention in 1968, when I was Sergeant at Arms of the Georgia delegation. Some of you may recognize the late Julian Bond standing right behind me. That was the convention of '68 in Chicago. There are 53 names of Douglas people mentioned in the book. Two of them, some of you might have known, Big Daddy and Granny Mae, Mr. and Ms. E.W. Sports, my parents. There are others in the Sports family that spent a lot of time in Douglas. My sister Ann, my late brother Don, my daughter Susan, my niece Sandra Sports Toller, my sister-in-law Ida Mae Sports of Claxton, and Don Sports Jr., who now lives and works with the television station in Macon. My wife Dee, who was medical technician at the Douglas Hospital when we married, died in 2007. Some of these folks would tell you that I was a pretty good Cub Scout in my younger days. I started out at the Enterprise when I was still in high school. Imagine Walter Jardine and Tom Johnson working the sidelines and having to use a speed graphic camera like the one on the left. And I was not always this well dressed. This was during a dance at South Georgia, the picture on the right side. Let me share a couple of firsts with you from my newspaper days. On October 4th, 1951, I covered my first school football game, and the headline mentioned someone many of you know, Walter Huckabee. And the first picture that I made that was published in an Enterprise was that of Johnny Mack Clark, the lead drummer in the high school band who later played in dance bands throughout Georgia. While working at the Enterprise, I also had the chance to make my first picture of a U.S. president, Dwight Eisenhower. This was over at the airport in Moultrie. In 1957, I was drafted into the Army and ended up on a great assignment in Germany, working as a public information photographer, and on occasion, getting a helicopter to come take us to ride. There was also time for travel in Europe, enjoying the finest, the very best accommodations. We traveled in 13 countries during my tour of duty. We were stationed in the mountains of Bavaria. That's the Neuschwanstein Castle located near Garmisch, an inspiration for Disney's Sleeping Beauty Castle. But on the weekends, we enjoyed visits to Paris and to Venice and many other great tourist attractions in Europe. Some of you will remember that the Douglas Kiwanis Club sponsored a visit to Douglas for a year by a 17-year-old German girl of Dortmund, Germany. I traveled to her home and wrote a feature story about Chris Blugel that appeared in the Enterprise, but was also featured in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Sunday magazine. I also did a feature story about the World's Fair at Brussels. The Autonium was a big attraction at the fair, but the Russians promoted their launching of Sputnik. In 1959, at the end of my Army tour, I went to Washington as a member of the staff of Congressman Iris Blitch. Iris Faircloth, as she was known then, had lived for a while in Douglas. I had also written some favorable material about her in the Enterprise. For those federal people that are here tonight, let me tell you that I came home from the Army, went to work in Washington. My salary was $6,000 a year, and I was happy to get it after being in the Army. I think they make a little more than that now. In 1960, the featured speaker at this Coffee County Chamber of Commerce was Georgia's senior U.S. Senator Richard B. Russell. Congresswoman Blitch and I were honored to accompany him from Washington for the dinner, in which my dad also attended. On January 20th, 1961, I had press credentials from the Albany Herald, where I had previously had good contacts, and I had the opportunity to be in the media stands right out in front for the swearing-in ceremony of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I heard him say and give that inspirational message, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Following the swearing-in ceremony, my press credentials made it possible for me to walk right beside the presidential limo from the U.S. Capitol to the White House. This is one of the photos I snapped of the new president and first lady along Pennsylvania Avenue. During a visit to the White House later that year, I did have a chance to actually meet President Kennedy. I even had one of his official photos with me and held it in my hands as he autographed to Joe Best Regards, John Kennedy. And yes, I wrote a special feature about this article. It was published in the Douglas Enterprise entitled, "How to Get the Autograph of a President." Upon the retirement from Congress by Mrs. Blitch, we returned to Douglas, bought the old Methodist parsonage that was now located on Peachtree Street, and I did some volunteer radio work with WOKA, working in the mornings with Lauren Nobles and the late Joe Vincent. A year later, an exciting 3 years began when I accepted a position with Channel 10 in Albany, where I would host the morning news program called Today in Georgia. We had a great news team, including Grady Shadburn, Sam Smith, Chris Clark, and Jerry Neesmith. Chris Clark, the second one from the right, moved to Nashville shortly after I went to Albany, and he became news director of a TV station in Nashville and had the distinction of hiring Oprah Winfrey for her first TV job. At this point, it was my duty to hire some replacements, and I brought to Channel 10 a young radio reporter who had lived in Nashville, Georgia, Dawson Mathis. That's Dawson on the right. Dawson became a great friend. He stayed at Channel 10 for 10 years and was the most popular newsman in all of South Georgia and was elected to Congress. We are very pleased that he was able to join us tonight. And it just so happened that a large number of Coffee Countyans always seemed to show up on Channel 10 programs during my tour of duty there. And this picture, left to right on the front row, is Beeman Keene, who was county agent, Woodrow Mixon, and J.B. Olive, in front of Grady Shadburn and me. And I usually was glad to volunteer to help interview the various beauty queens that appeared on the program RFD Sewega. I think this was the Sweet Potato Festival. On my first day on the air at Channel 10, I was contacted by one who is now the celebrity columnist for the Enterprise, Joe Ferris Jr., and he quickly signed the sports family up to be volunteers for ALSAC. We got to know a great humanitarian and founder of the St. Jude Hospital, Danny Thomas, and his daughter Marlo. And I even had the honor of introducing Danny during a dinner at the Dinkla Plaza Hotel in Atlanta. We participated in several celebrity telethons at Channel 10, including the March of Dimes event that featured Mingo, Ed Ames, and that was the week that was singer Nancy Ames. It was during one of these telethons that I met and had the chance to become friends with Ellie Mae of the Beverly Hillbillies, Donna Douglas. And we even got a proclamation from the mayor, Ely Holton, making her an honorary citizen of Douglas. Donna visited our home several times and even came to Douglas for a parade and the opening of the Farmers Bank. I would imagine that some of you here tonight remember that parade and Ellie Mae's visit to the bank in Douglas. For 4 months at the end of 1966, I managed the campaign of Bill Stuckey's race for Congress. This is a picture of Bill and Ethelyn. It's one I made in front of the headquarters in Brunswick. And this is a campaign that young Sid Cottingham came up to Eastman and traveled with the candidate and helped get him elected to Congress. At the same time Bill was elected to Congress and a win over Mac Mattingly, Governor-elect Lester Maddox picked Channel 10's owner, James H. Gray, to be the chairman of the party, and I was asked to move to Atlanta as the executive director. At the end of the day, after the legislature had confirmed Maddox and had been elected, I was invited to be one of the few to go to the governor's office, and as the governor sat in his chair for the very first time. That's me with the black hair on the left, next to T. Malone Sharp of Vidalia, and Mrs. Maddox is at the center. My duties as director of the party were varied and an honor to do, like introducing Senator Ed Muskie, who was running for president, officially qualifying Senator Herman Talmadge for re-election, and singing on stage with Republican Howard Bo Calloway and Democrat George T. Smith. I'm the one with the Nixon-Agnew hat on the right. I traveled with Governor Maddox extensively, and I made this photo of him with President Lyndon Johnson and Governor John Connally. This was made in St. Louis. I developed a great appreciation for the political career and built a friendship with Vice President Hubert Humphrey. I represented the governor several times for meetings at the White House and had the chance to attend receptions and meetings with President Lyndon Johnson. And whatever position I held through the years, I always tried to be helpful to Douglas and the people of my hometown. Shortly after becoming the executive director and moving to Atlanta, I set up a meeting in the governor's office with Lonnie A. Pope, former mayor of Douglas and distinguished Douglas citizen, an official of the Georgia Department of Transportation. And we were successful in that meeting in breaking a logjam regarding the Bowens Mill Road. At the time of this meeting in the governor's office, the Bowens Mill Road had been completed to the end of Coffee County, but ended in a cornfield in Ben Hill County and went no further. And I am also very proud that a few years later, when our Albany friend George Busby became governor, he listened to my recommendation, initiated through Fred Taylor, and appointed Thomas Fryer, publisher of the Enterprise, to serve on the Board of Regents, where he served with honor and did so much for our college and our community. When Jimmy Carter was elected governor, I was very happy. He asked me to continue as the executive director, and he also gave me a leadership award. Upon the death of Georgia's senior senator Richard Russell, Governor Carter appointed David H. Gambrell to the Senate. In this picture at the U.S. Capitol, Gambrell is congratulated by Governor Carter and by Senator Herman Talmadge. Gambrell invited me to be his chief of staff as I returned for my second tour of duty in Washington. Gambrell was a low-key Atlanta lawyer, very successful lawyer, a fine gentleman, but just not a politician. He lost his seat to Sam Nunn. I would later work on the staff of Congressman Dawson Mathis, seen here with President Carter, my friend from Channel 10 days. Dawson had said, "Joe, if I have a payroll, you can always be on it." And upon the loss by Senator Gambrell, I took Dawson up on his offer. In 1976, I ran against and was defeated by Billy Evans of Macon. And I am still proud, though, of the fact that I received 80% of the vote of my fellow Coffee Countians. And I saw Dewey Hayes here. Dewey tacked up pictures of me on every tree in the 8th District of Georgia. And I always will be grateful to Dewey for that work. Throughout his years as Secretary of State and as U.S. Senator, I was an advisor to Max Cleland and Vice Chairman of the Friends of Max Cleland Committee. Senator Cleland always liked this picture that I made of him in front of the American flag. And on one occasion, I had the pleasure of being at the White House Christmas party with President and Mrs. George W. Bush. When I first started thinking about what I wanted to do to make a living, I thought I wanted to be a press agent for a Hollywood star. The closest thing was getting to do some work with Burt Reynolds when he was making several movies in Georgia. This is a picture of Burt that I made for one of his early promotions of Smokey and the Bandit, and it was made at the Atlanta Civic Center. Now, once the book has been written, you need to make a little tour and promote your book. How proud I was to see my name in lights at South Georgia when I accepted an invitation to visit the campus. And the first copy of my book, Man in the Middle, in binder form, was presented to Dr. Virginia Carson to be placed in the college library. And I was invited to Douglas, the Lions Club, and saw old friends Red Marshall, Francis Lott, and Dewey Hayes Jr. It was during the annual Bobby Bowden reunion in South Georgia that I had a first date with a retired Douglas school teacher, Rhonda Davis. Rhonda, you always do what I say, so would you please come up here and stand with me for the last 3. We have been married a little over a year, and I will tell you there has not been a crossword at the sports household. Many, I didn't say you could talk. Many have asked how Rhonda and I got together, and I will tell you that on Facebook, she read about my book, Man in the Middle, and she sent me a note that she'd like to have one. I mailed it to her along with an invoice for $25, and she sent me a check even though I had spelled her name wrong. I've since corrected that mistake. We started making rounds of exciting events throughout Georgia. And if you take a look at the photographers that followed us around, keeping many of our friends posted on Facebook. We went to San Diego and Vail, Colorado for the annual Carter Center weekend. And Rhonda and I were married on December 16th, 2014. As I said, there hadn't been a crossword yet. Throughout the year, we have been hanging out and flying high. Let me say in closing, thank you for the hospitality extended to us tonight. I congratulate the award winners that will be inducted shortly, and I extend good wishes to the new chairman of the board, Stanley Lott. Stanley, there's an autographed copy of my book that will be up here for you. And special thanks to Joanne Lewis for her great work. She was one of the first people to buy my book, so I don't have to give her one. I leave you all tonight with what I call my 11th commandment. Enjoy the work that you do each day, and do something that will make a difference to your life, the life of your family, and to your community. Thank you very much.